Compliance Documentation 101 workshop. My name is Bridget O'Shea. I'm the Compliance Manager with the Department of Procurement Services. And today we are going over compliance. Again, to reiterate what Millie had explained, the City of Chicago remains committed to the growth and development of small, minority, and women-owned businesses, and we pursue every opportunity to ensure the city's procurement process remains fair, inclusive, transparent, and efficient. So, as far as our agenda today, we plan to cover a lot. Our focus is going to be centered around our compliance team, what we do, and the systems that we use to manage contract compliance throughout the contract process, from pre-award all the way to contract closeout. Our team reviews compliance plans for what are identified as the lowest responsive bidder. We monitor the contract goals, whether it be the MBE, WBE, or DBE goals, as well as if EEO requirements or Chicago residency or local residency requirements exist. How we do it, we utilize two systems primarily, the C2 system, which is the certification and compliance system for tracking of payments. We utilize the certified payroll processing system, also known as LCP Tracker. And we also have field analysts that actually go out to conduct site visits, whether it's a construction project or a certification firm looking to be certified. Our field analysts do it all. So to begin, the pre-award requirements. So contract goals are set. They are set on a project-by-project basis. They're contract-specific. MBE, WBE, or DBE direct opportunities are identified based off of the scope of work that is detailed based off of that specification. And then those contract goals are then inserted into that specification. The percentages could range anywhere from 0% to 100%, which is obviously a target market solicitation. Compliance plans. So for a proper compliance plan submittal, you have to keep in mind a bid or a proposal may be rejected as non-responsive if the bidder fails to submit one or more of the following with its bid proposal. The MBE, WBE, or DBE compliance plan, also known as the Schedule D, and this demonstrates how the bidder or proposer plans to meet those contract-specific goals. Additionally, the documentation of good faith efforts, if applicable, if they're unable to reach those contract goals, as well as a request for a reduction or waiver of the contract-specific goals, if necessary. So there's various schedules that we could potentially see, our compliance unit could potentially see, based on how the bidder or proposer intends to carry out those compliance goals. The Schedule B is a MW or DBD affidavit for a joint venture, and it applies only for those when there is a joint venture going on. The Schedule C is the letter of intent to perform as a subcontractor or second-tier contractor. So here you would be seeing your MBE, WBE, or DBE firms represented on that Schedule C, and we'll talk more about that. And then, of course, the Schedule D, that's the compliance plan. This is the document that's completed by the prime contractor, the bidder, and they are outlining how they're going to achieve those goals. They're outlining the firms that we see on the Schedule Cs. They're outlining the dollar amounts. They're outlining the general scope of work and how it relates to those participation goals. And then finally, the Schedule H. And the Schedule H is used for a bidder to document their good faith efforts. So again, if the bidder is unable to meet those contract-specific goals, this is the form, one of the documents, I should say, that outlines what their attempts were. How did they try and not succeed, but what did they do? Who did they contact? Did they call them by phone? Did they email them? It's all on that Schedule H. So in order to understand how we in compliance monitor contracts, it's important to understand how participation is counted. I think the best way to do that is understanding the true definition of a commercially useful function. So what you see on the screen, that's the definition of it, and I'm going to just read it out loud. Commercially useful function means responsibility for the execution of a distinct element of the work of the contractor, which is carried out by actually performing, managing, and supervising the work involved, evidencing the responsibilities and risks of a business owner, such as negotiating the terms of subcontracts, taking on financial risk with the contract or its subcontract, and responsibility for requiring the appropriate lines of credit and or loans, or fulfilling responsibilities as a joint venture partner as described in their joint venture agreement. The next slide is really helpful to understand commercially useful function, because that was a long definition I just read to you guys, but this really breaks it down in a three-pronged approach to remember that a commercially useful function, there will always be these three distinct categories or factors in deciphering whether or not a commercially useful function is being performed. So it comes down to the performance, the management, and supervising. We're going to talk a little bit more when we talk about our field analysts on how we observe this out in the field, in addition to the audits that we do in assessing it as well. So we look at it from several different points. Is anyone here familiar with the NAICS codes or certification codes? That's okay, we're talking about compliance, so. So NAICS codes really outlines it's an acronym for the North American Industry Classification System, and it establishes information specific to analyzing statistical data related to businesses in the economy. Not what we're talking about here. Why it's important to compliance is when a firm is seeking certification with the City of Chicago as a MW or DBE vendor, they're there to identify the areas of specialty, also known as the NAICS codes, in outlining the function that they are certified for or seeking certification for. So once they're certified with the City of Chicago and they have those codes, we in compliance look at the work that is described on your Schedule C and how it relates to your certification, that NAICS code that you have. So if on your Schedule C you say you're going to do painting and everything is, you're a painting company, but you are somehow certified in landscaping without that painting code, can happen, we will not give you credit for that painting because that NAICS code, your certification, is not in line with the work you're intending to perform. That's not to say you can't perform, but what it does say is we can't count that towards those contract-specific goals. Going back as far as how we count credit, so for firms that are certified as a MW or DBE and they're performing on that project, assuming in that area of specialty that they are certified in, participation credit is counted at 100%. Similarly, if they're a manufacturer, MW or DBE manufacturer, also 100%. Where it gets tricky is for suppliers. Suppliers receive 60% credit towards the goal. Now, if anyone here is a certified MW or DBE supplier, that doesn't impact the dollar amount that you receive and negotiate with the bidder, but it's actually the bidder or proposer who only receives that 60% credit. So if you have agreed you're supplying $100 worth of goods, you will receive or should receive $100 worth of payment. City of Chicago says, prime bidder, we're only counting $60 of that towards your goal. And I'm happy to take questions on that if anyone's confused later in our presentation. All right. So our next slide is specific to compliance reviews. So this is also pre-award. Before a contract is awarded, our compliance team will review compliance plans. We know already how credit is counted, whether it's 100% or 60%. We know about the certification and the NAICS codes that we look at when reviewing a compliance plan. And to be fair, we will always have questions. We will always want clarification when reviewing a compliance plan. And that could be our compliance unit reaching out directly to the bidder or proposer, or directly to that subcontractor that they've listed on their Schedule D, on their compliance plan. There will be times when we will want a better definition or a better understanding of the work that subcontractor intends to perform. There may be times when we want to see the proposal or the estimate that you submitted to see how those negotiations between the subcontractor and the prime played out. There may be questions around the certification and understanding how your certification plays in to the scope of work that you intend to perform. So we look at the Schedule Cs. We make sure everything is on there, the project name, the company name of that subcontractor, when it was signed, who signed it, when it was dated. Is it dated after the bid opening? That could be a red flag for us, right? We want to look at all of that. For anyone that is listening or here present with us today, I do want to say that Schedule Cs, you should never sign a blank Schedule C. And I want to emphasize that. I compare a blank Schedule C to a blank check, and I don't think anyone here would write a blank check. and that's really what it comes down to. And I want to emphasize the importance of that, because what you can see is you've signed your name, and you don't know the work that you're supposed to be performing. You don't know the actual agreed dollar amount. There's really no agreement in place. So be careful with those Schedule Cs. Sign them, complete them out yourself, fill them out yourself, sign them, and never leave it blank. The certification letters. So again, if you're certified firm and listed on the Schedule D, that compliance plan, we should also be reviewing those certification letters. It's a cross-check one to make sure that firm is still certified, as well as those codes, that area of specialty. And then again, the quotes and proposals. We will ask them, and at the end of the day, we just need to confirm the agreement between the prime bidder as well as the subcontractor. So now the project is awarded. Subcontract agreements. No later than 3 business days after the receipt of the executed contract, the contractor is required to execute a complete subcontract agreement on purchase orders with the MW or DBEs listed on the Schedule D. Within 8 days after receipt of the executed contract, we need copies, signed subcontract agreement, purchase orders, and any other additional agreements back to our department. Changes to compliance plans. So no changes to a compliance plan can or should be done without prior written approval from our CPO, our Chief Procurement Officer. Any request to change a compliance plan needs to be that written request. There is no changing a compliance plan, whether it's pre-award or after the contract has been awarded, without that conversation, without that written request, without the appropriate documentation. Otherwise, it could be, I mean, it is a violation of the special conditions, and it can be a breach of contract with the city, and it can cause the contract to be terminated. So again, and as a subcontractor, anyone who's here as a subcontractor and has performed, if you see them changing and not giving you that work or performing or telling you no longer on that compliance plan, then that would be something that you would also want to bring to compliance as well. All right, so now the contract is awarded, and this is where we actually begin our contract monitoring from a compliance standpoint. So our unit is responsible for not only monitoring the contract goals, the MBE, WB, or DBE goals, the contract goals, but the equal employment, the Chicago residency, and the local residency or project area residency requirements that are in place for that specific contract. So that's really when the monitoring and management of compliance comes into play, when that contract is awarded. Our next workshop is going to go further into C2. This is a very high level. So again, C2 is for our certification and compliance software, and that is the software that we use to track payments. So we track payments that are made to the prime, as well as that prime payments to the MW or DBE firm. It's a twofold process where firms are reporting what was paid and confirming what was paid. But I don't want to take away the next session. And we're able to see the trending reports as far as how that prime is trending towards their contract goals based off of what was paid and what has been paid to subcontractors, and how they're trending at meeting those, contract goals. The next slide is specific to our certified payroll processing system. And this system, some of you may be familiar with the software LCP Tracker. And what it is a completely automated labor compliance software where all contractors, regardless of their certification status for a construction project, are required to submit and certify their payroll records into the system. So again, regardless of your certification status, if you are performing on a project, you are reporting your actual payroll here. What we're able to manage is the labor compliance, the prevailing wages, the correct wages. We're able to manage the EEO. We're able to see the Chicago resident employees who are performing on a project. We're able to see for those Chicago residents the wards and community areas that the employees reside in. And these employees are specific to all of the contractors performing on that project, not limited, again, to just certified firms. The system is able to speak to a lot of the payroll softwares that exist for companies. So it usually is a simple export from one system to another, but it can handle manual entry as well. And we'll do the next slide. So as I mentioned, we have field analysts. They work with compliance as well as our certification unit. They're primarily under compliance as far as conducting site visits to physically observe. There are eyes and ears of the construction projects that are going on around the city. So they go out, they see what's happening, who's working, what work has been done. They'll conduct employee interviews. They'll look to make sure that the job boards are up in the field offices. And then from a certification standpoint, they will go out to interview potential firms that are seeking certification or renewals for certification. They'll interview the business owners. They'll look at the equipment. They'll take pictures and roam around the offices and talk to employees at times. So they really are the eyes and ears of what's going on, of the paper submissions that we receive. They're able to go out there and actually verify it. They conduct announced and unannounced site visits with our field analysts. They'll meet with the resident engineers. They'll meet with the project managers. And the purpose, again, is really to observe who's performing what. Are these contractors performing a commercially useful function? Again, employee interviews that they'll conduct as well. The job boards. The expectation, and sometimes contractors don't want to talk to our field analysts. Sometimes they just want to walk away. But the expectation is that the employees are required to talk with us and, you know, be part of those employee interviews and assisting him or them make their assessments. And contract closeout. So we've kind of gone through the pre-award. What are some of the schedules that we look at that we could potentially see when a bid is submitted? We've gone through what we look at when reviewing a compliance plan, how they plan on meeting those contract goals. We've gone through the contract actually being awarded and how we monitor projects, whether it's our C2 system or our certified payroll system. We talked about our site visits, and now it's time to close the project out. So this is a slide that I would rather read to you. In the event of noncompliance and without limitation, the following shall constitute a material breach of the contract between the city and the contractor and entitle the city to declare a default, terminate the contract, and exercise those remedies provided for in the contract at law or in equity if 1, failure to demonstrate good faith efforts, and 2, disqualification as an MBE or WBE of the contractor or any joint venture partner, subcontractor, or supplier if its status as an MBE or WBE was a factor in the award of the contract and such status was misrepresented by the contractor. So the result is payments due to the contractor may be withheld until corrective action is taken. If the city determines that the contractor has not made good faith efforts to fulfill its compliance plan, the affected MBE or WBE may be able to recover damages from that contractor. Failure to meet the EEO commitments will result in liquidated damages, and failure to meet the Chicago residency and local residency requirements may also result in liquidated damages. So that is compliance in a nutshell. And I apologize, I realize as I look at the clock, I'm a quick talker, so plenty of time for questions.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions? No? Do you have a compliance question? No. Okay, great. So we will let you guys know to, once again, go ahead and follow us on our social media pages. Our handle is Chicago DPS on our Facebook, our Twitter, and our YouTube channel. And the class following this one is our contract payment tracking. And we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you.